My friends, to Tice Talk here on Talk TV, and we are having a sparky debate with Bob Ward from the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics on all matters climate. And some of you have given a call, loads of messages coming in, one saying I'm talking too much. I'm sorry about that. I guess the clue's in the name, Tice Talk. Anyway, I think we've got a couple of callers. We've got Darren in Suffolk for Bob. Darren, good morning. What's your question for Bob?
Yeah, good morning. Do you know, if you're a football fan and you watch a football game and you're one-sided, you don't see the balanced view. You've always got, you know, your team's more important. You can't see what's really happening on the pitch. I think some of these scientists, they get so sidetracked with this has to be the solution, they don't step back and see it. Now, look, take electric cars, for instance. There's a lot of experts that you see online. You don't know whether these are accurate or not, but they talk about what it takes to make a battery, and the fact that you can't actually recycle the battery. If some of these are true, and it really does take 100 barrels of oil to make a car battery, and kids are dying getting the zinc and the minerals to actually make these car batteries, and the fact that my friend's going to cost him £20,000 to charge 2 hybrids a year because of the cost. This is not the practical solution moving forward. And it's interesting that we talk about CO2, because back in the 70s, it was let's get lead out of petrol because it's bad for the environment. Then it became CO2. We talk about methane. We talk about nitrogen. It's as if there's something that needs to meet the narrative to get it right. Okay,
Darren, let's let Bob answer.
Well, I hope you'll agree that it was a good idea to get lead out of petrol, because lead is what was leading to poisoning of babies and in the environment. So we have a long history of recognising problems and trying to tackle them. With electric cars, it's quite true that, like the need to manufacture the batteries for conventional internal combustion engines, you do need energy and you do need a lot of different metals and materials. And in the end, we're going to have to find ways of having sustainable supplies of all the materials and to be able to recycle. Fortunately, a lot of our industrial processes now are finding alternatives to fossil fuels. For instance, when you make steel, you won't necessarily have to use electricity from coal-fired power stations or even coke. You might be able to use hydrogen and start using electric arc furnaces. So we are moving slowly towards it. And in the end, I think most electric car owners are finding at the moment that their bills are much lower than those who have petrol-driven cars, because the price of petrol and diesel.
Darren, great question. What I do know, and it is a good point about the lithium, we've actually got lots of lithium here in Cornwall. Yes, I've had one of the producers, and I would like to see us, you know, using our own resources. We might have time to touch on sugar. Darren, great call. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Basingstoke, where Simon's on the line. Hi, Simon.
Yes, hi, Richard. Thank Mr. Ward for coming on the show. I have several questions for him.
Make it one, because we've got loads of calls. Just ask one critical one.
Right, okay. Well, I'll ask the question about settled science. Unlike Mr. Ward, I have a physics degree from University College London, and there is no such thing as settled science. Physicists believe that the Earth moved through an ether in the 1900s until a little-known patent clerk called Albert Einstein came out with his general and special theories of relativity. And one of the biggest fear I have about the attitude of the climate scientists is they are ascribing attributes to it that aren't applicable. The climate system is a non-linear system. That means you cannot make long-term predictions unless you know the exact state at which that system started. And I'd like to see Mr. Ward address that question, because I would say that what he's claiming is not even theoretically possible.
Thank you, Simon. Bob?
Yeah, so let's start with observations. It's unequivocal that the Earth has been warming over the last 100 years or so. And the climate scientists, who are mostly physicists, remember, most of them are physicists, have been studying what has been driving that. They've concluded that it's the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere primarily that's been driving that. You're quite right that it's a complex system. It is very difficult to model the climate and to simulate it. That's why they have to use computers to do the complex physics calculations. I'm afraid that most people who oppose the science on climate change think that the use of computer models is somehow a trick. But frankly, every area of science at the moment, medicine, engineering, physics, they all use computer models.
Bob, do you accept
it's too complicated not to use computers?
Bob, do you accept in the medieval warm period and the Roman warm period that it was 1 or 2 degrees warmer than we're currently?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
Well, that's what the lots of data and graphs.
No, I've seen the graph that you've shown, Richard. So
you haven't seen this one. You haven't seen
it.
this one, actually.
Yeah, I have seen it. You've been tweeting it before, and it's what Brian Catt presented to you a few weeks ago.
It's based
on a Greenland ice sheet core, and it's only showing Greenland, and it's basically attributing it to a study which doesn't cover that period. It actually was invented by Anthony Watts, who is a blogger in the US.
Hang on, but this is from ice cores from Greenland. So you're questioning that data and that science?
What I'm questioning is whether you can get a global picture from a single ice core.
So you deny that there's been warmer periods. You think we're at the warmest period ever, is that right?
We are currently warmer now than we have been in the last 12,000 years since the end of the
Despite multiple graphs showing that actually it's been warmer.
There's not multiple graphs. Well, I can tell you, Richard, the graphs that you've been showing have been invented by bloggers. They've not been produced by scientists. The scientists, if people want reliable science, they should go and have a look. They should have a look at the website of the Royal Society or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change or the Met Office. Go to a reputable science organisation. Don't go to some blog.
This is not some blog. This is data from ice cores from Greenland, produced in multiple different things. I'm happy to show it. I'm going to move on.
It's wrong. It's a fake graph, Richard.
So you think it's fake and fraudulent, but despite the fact there are multiple graphs of it, fine. No, you don't think it's the warmest period. Let's go down to Essex, where Peter's on the line. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Richard. Yeah. Well, I would like to say to your guest there is, he's like all climate evangelists. He gives us all these things about this is going up, that is going up. Surely the whole truth is how much more CO2 is in the air now than there was, and there's hardly any. Al Gore was 20 years ago. He came on the BBC and he said the world was going to warm 3 degrees in 7 years. I remember this distinctly. And all the ice on the North Pole.
Great question.
Flood everywhere. And it was total rubbish, wasn't
it? Peter, great question. How much CO2 now have we got in the atmosphere?
Yeah, so it's approaching, getting close to 420 parts per million. Before industrialisation, it was about 280. So it's gone up by about 50% since industrialisation.
John Kerry wants to get rid of CO2 in something that I saw him saying. But actually, CO2 is a good thing, isn't it? I mean, it's not a poison. We need CO2 for photosynthesis, for plants to grow. And that increase, is it a coincidence? And it seems to me we've got, in the last 40 or 50 years, the world is greener. Across the world, the planet is greener. Maybe that's because there's more CO2 in the atmosphere.
There certainly has been a stimulus.
But that's good news.
It is good news, but it hasn't made up for the massive deforestation that's been going on around the world, which has been far worse.
I'm with you on deforestation, but more CO2 has led to more greening, which means more cheaper food, which means billions of people are leading longer, healthier, happier lives.
If that was all that was happening, Richard, if all that was happening was that you were giving more CO2 to plants, then fine, but we're not. It's changing the climate and it's hurting people all around the world. It's damaging lives and livelihoods as a result of changes in extreme weather.
Where's the hurt of cheaper, more plentiful food, meaning billions of people are leading longer lives?
In the people whose lives are being damaged by flooding along coastlines, by flooding from heavier rainfall, by droughts, by heat waves, but all of these impacts that you're ignoring. You're pretending that it doesn't matter.
The debate about this is, in my view, we need to adapt. We need to invest money in sea level defences, which is much, much cheaper than the mitigation you want in order to try and stop climate change, which is not stoppable.
So it's only cheaper if you don't have high levels of climate change, and the problem is that we've had 1 degree of warming at the moment, just over 1 degree. We're struggling to deal with that. The wildfires around London during the summer didn't look to me like that was we were adapting to that. Yeah. And if we get up to 2 or 3 degrees of warming, Richard, that's going to be beyond, not just beyond historical,
but even
our evolutionary experience. Humans have never lived in a climate
Even you in
like
your
that.
Dublin talk 7 years ago admitted that slightly inconveniently, actually temperatures were plateauing, that global warming wasn't increasing.
Yeah.
Now, we've got another caller here, Mike from...
No, I didn't. I pointed out that you get short-term fluctuations,
and
there was a long-term upward trend. Again, you're getting completely confused by the noise and ignoring the signal.
Let's go to Mike, who is calling from a mobile. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Who that guy is that you've got there?
It's the expert Bob Ward from the London School of Economics, Mike.
What's he an expert in exactly? He doesn't seem to mention the hugest and most massive effect that has changed the planet over the past several centuries, and that is the increased population. So clearly the best thing to do to get rid of the climate change, which is affected so much by the numbers of people who are now living here, is to somehow start reducing the size of the population. Surely that would be something he would favour.
Well, if you're volunteering for you and your family to depopulate the Earth, then I suggest you go ahead. But I'm more interested in improving...
All you got to do, Richard, is scratch the skin of these bozos, right? They start asking you to kill yourself. That's nice, isn't it? Marvellous. I think you're barking up the wrong tree,
I think people... I'm interested in making people's lives better. I'm not interested in telling people that they can't have babies, or you have to reduce people's family sizes. There's a long history of policymakers trying to do that. I'm not interested in trying to convince people that they should be having smaller families.
But do you think that the numbers of people on this planet, because it's increased by a massive number, has had any effect on the climate?
The problem has been the consumption of people.
Yes or no?
I don't think people are the problem.
Has the increased population increased the problem?
I'm sorry you think that people are the problem. People are not the problem.
But people
are affecting it.
People living unsustainable lifestyles, consuming the Earth's resources and polluting it so it damages other people's lives. That's the problem.
People living in the slums of Bombay, those people?
No, they're not the people. The people who have unsustainable lifestyles.
Mike, I've got to go because I've got to finish off. Mike, great call. Bob, just before we finish, your institute is funded by a variety of donors, including the UK taxpayer is contributing significant sums. From the website, I saw about £7 million, which is obviously a major sum of money. Are there anybody in your team who is looking at it from the different side of the argument, from a sceptic side of the argument, in a sense, deliberately challenging your view of the debate?
There are lots of people trying to find it, because you'd win a Nobel Prize if you could overturn 200 years of science. Yeah, I've got people in my team who look at models all the time. They can't find the evidence. People have been trying for 200 years, Richard. I think they would have found it if it was an alternative explanation.
You've got £7 million worth of taxpaying funding. I think we need to make sure that people are properly looking at the debate. We have had a full-on active debate with Bob Ward. Lots of messages and tweets coming in. I'll get to those later. Because it really is, there's just loads and loads of thoughts. We haven't had time to talk about shale gas. Maybe, can we finish? I mean, that's good news, lifting the moratorium, shale gas, cheap UK gas, jobs.
Yeah, Richard, so tell me, how much do you think energy bills will go down this winter as a result of...
Well, not this winter, but it can in the future, because we can have local domestic...
So it'll make no difference this winter?
Not this winter, but in terms of our self-reliance...
It's been a massive distraction.
No, it's not
energy
a distraction.
Efficiency is where we should be talking at the moment. That will reduce people's bills.
Fantastic. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll take more calls. It's Tice Talk here at the home of common sense, where we have wide, difficult, sometimes challenging debate. It is, of course, Talk TV. Director of the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics, and is has a degree in geology and worked at the Royal Society, didn't you?
Did, yeah.
And a fellow of the Geological Society. You're a fellow of lots of things, Bob.
Yeah.
The Royal Geographical Society, the Energy Institute, and a member of the American Geophysical Unions.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say you're an expert?
I'm not a researcher, I'm not an academic, but I spend a lot of time looking at policy.
Right, policy. And so, but I mean, obviously with that background, you would be more of an expert than many. And you've obviously been at the Institute for some time. And this is such a big issue for so many people. Lots of corporations, obviously, very focused on climate and net zero. And in a sense, my view on life is that we all care about the environment. we all want cleaner air. And I was delighted, actually. I think you came in an electric vehicle to the show, a Tesla.
Yes.
The issue is actually how we reduce emissions and get cleaner air in our towns and cities at an affordable price, particularly, for everybody. That's the big issue. I mean, do you drive a car? Do you drive a car? Have you got?
I recently bought a hybrid car.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So you sort of.
But I don't drive. Generally, in London, I use public transport because it's quicker and easier.
And we're all being told to buy electric cars. And what about heat pumps? I mean, do you live in a flat or house?
I live in a hat. I haven't got a heat pump. Yeah, I still have a boiler that's relatively new. I hope when I eventually get to a stage where I need to replace the boiler, I'll replace it with a heat pump.
Right. I mean, and that is one of the big debates. About heat pumps, and we might come on to that. So the big debate, climate change, which obviously, I mean, the climate's changed for millions, if not billions of years.
Yeah.
Do you think we can stop climate change?
This period of warming that we've seen, and it's absolutely clear, period of warming of the Earth that's happened in the last century or so, the only explanation for it is the rise in the concentrations of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There's no other reasonable explanation. But scientists have looked for it.
But the world has warmed before, Bob. I mean,
yeah, but it doesn't mean that the explanation is the same. So in the past, a lot of the changes have been driven by fluctuations in the Earth's orbit. And we, of course, can measure that very precisely now. And we can see that the Earth's orbit is not fluctuating at the moment. That was what was the trigger for the big ice ages, for instance, in the past. So we can see all of the things, we can measure all of the things that might make an impact, and the only way of explaining it.
So what percentage do you think of this recent warming period? There's no question, we are in a warming phase. That is indisputable. What percentage of that do you think is man-made induced CO2 as opposed to natural climate change, because climate change has always gone on and we've come from a pretty low temperature?
All of it is down to man.
100%.
Yeah, because, in fact, if it hadn't been for the fact that we've also put a lot of aerosols, fine particles in the atmosphere as a result of industrial processes, which tend to reflect the sunlight and cause a cooling effect, greenhouse gases would have warmed the Earth even more than we've seen so far. So all of it. And let me emphasise here, all I'm doing is reporting to you what the researchers have found. It's been examined by scientists all around the world. It's published reviews by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
We've got to trust them. We've got to trust them. They've got it right. But actually,
well, it's like trusting doctors and any other experts you have, engineers. So we're sitting in a big tower in London. If you suddenly say, I don't trust the engineers anymore, well, you wouldn't be coming into work.
And sometimes doctors get it wrong, and sometimes, sadly, engineers get it wrong.
Indeed.
But actually,
this is 200 years of science we're talking about here.
But the truth
I think it would have emerged.
But the truth is, there's actually, amongst all the discussion, there's lots of good news that's happened recently. For example, there are record numbers of polar bears out there. There's record levels of coral on the Great Barrier Reef, despite the experts saying the polar bears would disappear. The Great Barrier Reef was irreversibly damaged. The South Pole has just had the coldest winter since records began 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. Arctic sea ice is recovering, which must be good news. It's within 3% of the 30-year EU average. In the Arctic here, the sea ice this year is at higher levels than the last 11 years, more than 1995. So quite often, the forecasters and the experts don't get it right, Bob.
No, I'm afraid what you're doing is trying to ignore all the trends and cherry-picking little data points.
What I'm saying is that the experts and the forecasters are not always right.
Well, they're right about long-term trends, but predicting the future precisely is difficult. So let's go through some of your examples. So if you show a graph of what's happening in the Arctic, the sea ice, it's very clearly declining. It's going down.
Well, I think we've got a graph,
been going down.
And I think you've got one there.
Yeah, I've got one. Right. I haven't got a graph, though, showing the most important thing, which is where the ice is going.
This may appear on the screen, but we've got here the extent of sea ice, and this is from the National Snow and Ice Data Centre from the University of Colorado, showing the levels of sea ice in the Arctic in 1995 compared on the same day, 24th of May, compared to 24th of May 2022. And basically, there's no trend of decline over the last 15 years. I mean, the expert Al Gore predicted that there'll be no sea ice.
You can't... This is ridiculous. So May, you've taken one day in May, you've taken 2 days, and you're trying to establish what the trend is.
It's a trend.
The trend can't be told from 2 single days. It's like me saying today is warmer than yesterday, therefore it must be warming, or if tomorrow's cold.
Bob, the ice doesn't disappear and reappear again day in, day out. It's a long-term trend.
Yeah, so if you look at when September is when Arctic sea ice gets to its lowest point. It goes through a refreezing and a melting point. This September was the 10th lowest area of sea ice on record. So part of a trend. It's not every single year lower.
But it's recovering, isn't it, Bob? No, it's not. The trend is recovering. The low point was 2000. Bob, the National Snow and Ice Centre.
I suggest you look at... Put on the screen now the trend showing the area of sea ice. If you show that, go to the National Sea and Ice Data Centre, show the graph, it's down. It's down.
Bob, the low point was 2012, and now it is recovering. We've just had the greatest summer sea ice for the last 11 years, I'm so sorry, and the National Snow and Ice Centre says the ice extent is likely to remain higher than for recent years. This is good news.
No, it's not good news, because what's happening, Richard, is you're taking 2 points and you're ignoring the trend. As I said, it's like saying,
the trend is better
if
in the last 10 years.
Tomorrow is colder than today, you're going to say, oh, well, the Earth is getting colder. It doesn't work that way.
The National Snow and Ice Centre is saying that levels are going to remain higher than recent years. We're well above the low point.
This year.
We're within 3% of the 30-year average.
Yeah, well, the trend
is not down, Bob.
It is. Show the graph, Richard. You can show the graph. Ask your producer now to call it up on screen and show the graph.
I've just shown the graph.
You haven't. This is not a graph.
That is a picture.
That is not a graph. That is a picture of snow and ice on 2 days.
We're going to agree to disagree. Let's move on, okay? Right? We've got the coldest July in the Bering Strait for 70 years. Right? Al Gore said that Arctic sea ice would be gone by 2014. Well, it turns out it hasn't. Other good news.
Well, hold on. That's not true. So what Al Gore... Actually, it isn't. Al Gore was reporting... this goes back, I mean, it was about 10 years ago he said that, and he said some scientists were predicting that we might start to see ice-free summers in the Arctic as soon as perhaps 2014. Now, that clearly was wrong, and as I said, it is difficult doing it, but the trend is down. Anybody can go and check on the National Sea and Ice Data Centre. Have a look at the graph. You'll see the trend is down.
You will see the data shows the low point was 2012. And where there's good news, I think we should celebrate it. The other, here's the forecasters. The thing about the forecasters, Bob, you know, this hurricane season in Florida, at the beginning of the beginning of summer, they forecast that it would be much worse than average. It turns out they've been completely wrong, and actually this is the lowest hurricane season in the Atlantic for the last 30 years.
Well, we'll see what the people of Florida think later this year. There's a big hurricane heading for them now.
But we're correct.
So you're already talking about, it's all going to be fine. But it isn't.
Let's see. I'm just saying the trend is the forecast and the experts often get it wrong. That is my point.
The trend in tropical cyclones, right, in most basins, including the North Atlantic, is up. More of the stronger storms. And we know that this is linked to climate change because the water at the surface of the ocean is now warmer. That is the fuel that drives the strengthening. You're getting more of these rapidly strengthening. So what we're going to see, let me just make a prediction that you can check now. Over the course of this week, that tropical cyclone that's going up into the Gulf of Mexico is going to rapidly intensify, rapidly become a major hurricane.
And we've had cyclones forever.
But the pace at which they become stronger is increasing. But that's documented.
But there is good news, Bob, isn't
dangerous.
There is good news because in the last 100 years, the number of people who sadly died in extreme weather events has collapsed by about 96%. Again, good news.
It's good news.
Excellent.
That we are getting better. Yeah, but that's because we're adapting, okay? We're spending increasing amounts of our wealth are going to be spent on dealing with these impacts. So remember what we've just seen this summer in London. We saw
lovely warm weather.
40 degrees or so. We'll have to see if people really think there is. We saw hundreds of people died. We saw wildfires around the outskirts of London, destroying people's
10
properties.
times more people die in the extreme cold than the extreme heat.
Well, people say this all the time. So what you're saying is people whose family and friends have died of heat, they don't matter. Because
I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm not saying they don't matter.
Why did you raise it, Richard?
Every death is a sadness.
Every time I talk about people who die from heat, you say, oh, well, never mind that. People die over the cold.
I'm saying that actually, warmth is a good thing for many people. And, every death is a tragedy, but less people die of warmth than of cold.
Tell me how many fewer people are dying in the winter at the moment because of climate change. Come on, tell me.
But I don't know that stat. What I do know is that 10 times more people die. Bob, it is well documented that 10 times more people die in the extreme cold.
Lots of people die still.
I'm still on the experts.
Of cold weather. If you thought
everybody dies, Bob.
If you thought that climate change was so good, then we'd be talking about what great news it was. The number of people who have
Let's go back to the original question.
Dying
do
of
you think
cold,
we can stop climate change? Do you think we can stop climate change? Do you think we can stop?
Of course we can.
You think we can stop climate change that's gone on for millions of years?
Yeah. So Richard, so let me go back. So remember, I'm a geologist, so I've studied this along with lots of other geologists. Things like changes in the Earth's orbit, little fluctuations are what have driven ice ages in the past. But we can measure that. We can measure very precisely
you can't stop the
our
Earth
position.
Bob, you can't stop the Earth orbiting. You can't stop the sun shining.
Richard, if you want to put your viewers here at greater risk by deliberately not understanding what's happening, they're the ones who are suffering. They're the ones who are having to pay through their lives and livelihoods being damaged. We're getting increasing storms. We're getting higher sea levels, which we're destroying properties across our coastline. We're getting more people dying from heat-related.
Okay. So you think we can stop climate change?
So we're getting people's lives are suffering, and all you're doing is trivialising it by talking. Yeah, of course you are. Talking about, we can't stop the Earth orbiting. It's got nothing to do with that.
How are you going to stop climate change? So if we get to net zero, do you think that stops climate change?
That's what will stop when we get greenhouse gas emissions down effectively to zero. The concentrations will stop and the temperature will stop rising almost within a few years.
Right.
Within a few years, probably within a decade.
Right. So the international...
But sea levels will continue to rise because the
intergovernmental
warming...
Bob, the intergovernmental panel...
that cause sea level to rise will continue longer.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says that when we get to net zero, it'll take how many years to stop sea level rise, which is one of the things that people are most concerned about climate change. How many years?
It will go on for centuries because of the amount of heat.
So we get to net zero, it's not going to make any difference. The IPCC says it's going to make no difference for 200 years plus to sea level rise. So it would be better to adapt and build sea level defences. Sea level rise
is not the only thing that matters. People are suffering through loads of different impacts of climate change, including increased heat, increased rainfall. Remember, a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. It means it rains harder. You get more flooding. It seems to me like you don't care about the fact that more people are suffering in this country from increased rainfall leading to flooding. These are the impacts that are happening that are affecting your viewers, and you're refusing to engage with it.
My point is, I'm engaging with it, right? I'm actually also doing my bit to reduce emissions, more than, frankly, most people. I've got an electric car, you haven't. I've got solar panels on my buildings, you haven't. You haven't got a heat pump yet.
Well, congratulations, Richard. So I don't know why you're arguing, but there's no problem.
The point is, I want cleaner air in our cities and towns. I don't think it'll stop climate change, because climate change has gone on for millions and millions of years. So we need to adapt. What we should do is we should adapt.
Why do you think that every single reputable scientific organisation in the world accepts...
I'm glad you raised that.
The evidence is very clear because the Earth is warming, and it's being driven by...
I'm glad you said it.
Why is every
why is it that four highly reputable Italian scientists have just produced a study saying there's no evidence of a climate emergency. Why is it that other scientists, 1,000 of them, and professionals have signed something called the World Climate Declaration from Clinton? Why is it Dr. Richard Lindzen from the MIT has said the IPCC narrative is ill-conceived, simplistic, and undermined by observational evidence?
What you're doing
there is
basically,
a debate.
so
there is
Richard,
a debate.
if you go and get a medical diagnosis from a hospital, medical experts, you either decide to accept it, or, in your view, you go down the pub, you find some crank who'll tell you something different that you like,
no, Bob,
and
you cannot call those 4 Italian scientists cranks. They're very qualified. You cannot call Dr. Richard Lindzen a crank.
Richard Lindzen doesn't believe that smoking causes lung cancer.
I do actually.
He has lots of peculiar ideas about lots of
I
things.
recommend people get a second opinion, because of what I've shown
earlier.
But
not from some guy you met down the pub.
No, from other scientists and experts. What I've shown clearly this morning, Bob, is that experts often get it wrong. In fact, even you yourself got it wrong. You spoke at a conference in 2015, April 15 in Dublin, where you said that sea level rise before the end of this century was likely to rise by 2 metres, and yet the Royal Society you're a member of...
I didn't say likely to rise.
You did say that.
No, I didn't.
You did. The Royal Society you're a member of said it'll rise between 0.4 and 0.8. The National Tidal Sea Level Society says it'll rise by 0.2. So even the experts have different views.
Understood. So we all talk about the uncertainties in it. At the moment, sea level rise is going at a pace that we think it'll probably exceed a metre compared to pre-industrial times.
How much is sea level rise in the UK at the moment, Bob, per annum?
So you have to separate out the effect of the global rise against local land changes, different parts of the country going up and down.
Roughly.
But roughly around our coastline, the overall effect is about 3 millimetres a year, which is what is happening around the world. But in individual places that are going up and down, they're still rebounding from the last ice age.
Right.
So
that's 3 centimetres a decade, so that's 30 centimetres in 100 years. That's not a metre,
but it's
Bob.
accelerating. It's accelerating, Richard. You can't draw a straight line through it. It's accelerating. It's going up.
The truth is, you think you can stop climate change. I don't. Let's see what our callers think after the break, because we are going to take a quick break. Give us a ring, 0344 499 1000. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV.